name is Kara Hansen, and I was asked to give a documentary about Thomas Aquino, so I'm going to start with his early life. Thomas was born on January 28th on 1225. According to some authors, he was born in the castle of his father. The rest of his family's sons actually pursued military careers, but Thomas was asked to follow his uncle into abbacy. Whenever he was 5, his parents enrolled him at Monte Cassino, but then there was a military conflict between Emperor Frederick II and Pope Gregory IX that actually caused Thomas to leave. And so whenever he was 19, he decided to join the Dominican order, and this really displeased his family. And the Dominican order then arranged for Thomas to move to Paris. And so while Thomas was on his way to Paris, he made a pit stop in Rome. And whenever he was in Rome, his brothers found him and they took him back to his parents. And then his parents decided to hold him prisoner for almost 1 year in their castle to prevent him from joining the Dominican order. And whenever he was a prisoner, he never gave up hope to join the Dominican order. His family members did their best to dissuade him, but Thomas kept high hopes. And Thomas's brothers actually tried to dissuade Thomas from the Dominican order by hiring a prostitute to seduce Thomas. This fortunately didn't work, and Thomas used a fire iron to push her away. And finally, his mother arranged for Thomas to sneak out her window and to then join the Dominican order. And so now on to Thomas's education. Thomas attended the University of Naples, which is where he learned about the Dominican order. Thomas continued to pursue his studies with the Dominicans in Naples, Paris, and Cologne. Thomas was ordained in Cologne, and then he went on to teach at the University of Paris. And actually, under St. Albert the Great, Thomas earned his doctorate in theology. Thomas also studied primary education at a Benedictine house in Naples. He studied Aristotle's work, which would later launch Thomas's interest in philosophy. And so now on to his philosophy. Thomas was a theologian and a scholastic philosopher. Thomas never considered himself a philosopher, but he criticized other philosophers. Thomas was influenced by Aristotle the most, calling him the philosopher. Thomas devoted himself to a life of traveling, writing, teaching, public speaking, and preaching. Thomas's revolutionary views rejected the theory of how faith and reason cannot work together, and Thomas asserted, quote, "Both kinds of knowledge ultimately come from God," end quote, and explained that both kinds of knowledge were compatible. Thomas also believed that revelation could guide reason and prevent it from making mistakes. And so now on to Thomas's philosophy on the existence of God. And so Thomas believed that the existence of God could be proven in 5 ways. The first is observing movement in the world as proof of God, the immovable motor. Second, observing cause and effect and identifying God as the cause of everything. Third, concluding that the impermanent nature of being proves the existence of a necessary being, that being God, who originates only from within himself. 4, noticing varying levels of human perfection and determining that a supreme being must therefore exist. 5, knowing that natural beings could not have intelligence without it being granted to them by God. It's now on to Thomas's philosophy of his 3 laws. And so Thomas believed that the laws of the state were a natural product of human nature. He believed that they were crucial to social welfare. When people abided by the social laws, they could then have eternal salvation of their souls in the afterlife. And so Thomas identified 3 types of laws. The first being natural. Natural prompts the man to act in accordance with achieving his goals and governs man's sense of right and wrong. The second being positive. The positive is the law of the state or government and should always be a manifestation of natural law. The third is eternal. Eternal depends on reason, and puts into action through free will, which also works toward accomplishment of man's spiritual goals. It's now on to Thomas's major works. Thomas actually has close to 60 known works, which ranged in length from really short to really long. And so Thomas wrote a commentary on scholastic theologian Peter Lombard's 4 books of sentences. And Thomas's commentary was called, excuse me if I pronounce this wrong, but Scriptum Super Libros Sententiarum, and which means commentary on the sentences. Thomas also wrote de ente et essential, which means on being and essence. Thomas wrote Impugnantes de cultum et religion, which means against those who assail the worship of God and religion. He wrote Summa Theologica, and he wrote Summa contra Gentiles. Thomas is actually widely known for his commentaries in examining Aristotle's writing, which was his favorite philosopher. These writings from Aristotle would include On the Heavens, Meteorology, On Generation and Corruption, On the Soul, Nicomachean Ethics, and Metaphysics. Shortly after Thomas's death, Lombard's 4 books of sentences was replaced by Thomas's Summa Theologica, which is cool. So now on to Thomas's later life and then his death. So during the feast of St. Nicholas in 1273, Thomas had a mystical vision that made writing seem really unimportant to him, which was really weird. And so Thomas's confessor, Father Reginald of Piperno, he encouraged Thomas to keep writing, but then Thomas refused, and Thomas actually never wrote again. And in January in 1274, Thomas was on a journey to France, but then, unfortunately, on the way, he became sick at a monastery in Italy. And there at the monastery in Italy, Thomas passed away on March 7th, 1274. And Thomas's last words were, "This is my rest forever and ever. Here will I swell, for I have chosen it." And so that's the life of Thomas Aquino. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a great day.